5 o'clock, man accused of drilling a puppy's paws into a wall is now going to prison.
Tyler Durdo pled guilty in Union County. They arrested him back in February after he used an electric drill to screw the paws of a 5-month-old puppy to the wall. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years probation.
A solicitor's office said someone who found the puppy called for help. Durdo struggled with deputies when they took him into custody, including headbutting one deputy and trying to escape from a patrol vehicle. He was also found to be in possession of meth. The puppy, named Liam, has since recovered from his injuries and has been adopted into a loving home.